Hey, so today is the 1st of August that I'm filming this, which means I have a ton of life admin things to get done. But before that, Triton graduated his manners class today, and that's what's prompted this video. Manners class, it's beyond puppy class. It's learning things like walking nicely on a lead, sitting at a cafe, things that he kind of already did, but just trying to get on top of it a bit more. I dressed up a little bit for his graduation, except that it's cold in Sydney, so I've got interesting pants instead of my dodgy dog walking jeans. And if it'll focus on me, hello camera. I did wear this, but it was too cold to show it off, so I got an extra necklace. Yeah, anyway, Sydney weather is not exactly dress up friendly, but I did me makeup too. So, which is an achievement because I had a really depressed morning. So me making an effort. Well done me, well done Triton, graduating. There's still a lot of work to do, but there's some things he's really good at, like not going for treats when I tell him not to. But when he sees dogs, he really wants to play. Anyway, intro out of the way. The thought today is breeders versus rescue dogs. Because I have done both. Now, my first dog, Labrador, she was from a breeder, but then we did all rescues. First Allie, Labrador from a breeder. And then after a year, we got Max, who came through the fence. I won't tell the story again, but he's kind of a rescue, but the guy got him from a breeder before letting us have him. So that's kind of our first accidental rescue. Then after them, I rescued Hope from a no-kill breeder, so they take in pregnant dogs and, work with some really difficult cases. I think they're still around, but their website went down and it's hard to find out anything about them anymore, so I don't know what's going on. Then the year after, we got Marley from the same place, but he was an adult. So, those were proper rescues. Hope had his more medical issues and anxiety. Marley, the Labrador. So we had one breeder Labrador and then one rescue Labrador. And quite different personalities, but also one's female, one's male. And he definitely went through something before he came to us, but he was very sweet. And so we've had a full spectrum of different situations. We've had breeder dog accidental rescue, puppy rescue, which was Hope, and then adult dog rescue, which was Marley. So I think I've got a pretty rounded perspective of different dogs in different situations. And then of course Triton is from a breeder, and it's the first time I have chosen the breed and the breeder and gone through the whole process myself. Also, Triton is a guardian dog. I was going to make a separate video on that, but long story short, he will be used for breeding provided he passes medical tests and genetic whatever match with a female, or more than one female, I don't know. So he is my first not desexed dog. Now, I think some background for people overseas. Australia is very obsessed with desexing dogs early, because we're very... Well, our culture, we're very aware of overbreeding, of puppy farms, and the problem of lots of dogs being in rescue shelters, needing to be adopted. Huge problem. So, especially, when I got my first dog, even with the dogs you get from a breeder, you desex them almost as soon as you get them. I can't remember exactly what age, but it was very early. I think now there's a little bit more recognition that desexing early is not necessarily the best thing for the health of the dog. So I think these days it's maybe more like 6 months that they start to, that's when the dogs are starting to go through puberty. And so that's when, with the registration at council and all that, that's when, if you don't desex by 6 months and you don't have a valid excuse, you get slapped with extra fees. Whereas I know in other places like Europe, in Finland, which is where Triton's breeds from, very unusual to desex the dog at all. And, they just deal with it. And I don't really know much about the situation with rescues in Finland, though. So I'm mainly talking about the Australian experience. Here though, so what prompted, that's the background of the desexing issue in Australia. What's the problem with desexing? Well, it's like with humans, which we are noticing a bit with some of the kids who are doing the whole gender transition thing too early, getting puberty blockers too early, and so on. Like, there are things that can go wrong with growth and bone density. There's a little bit of debate, but, you know, you have, like, you know, we evolved hormones for a reason. And so, you know, if you cut off all of that before a creature gets a chance to fully develop, it's not the most healthy thing. How unhealthy it is, I don't know. I can't be bothered to go into the research, but so there's that. Whereas the reason we desex early is to prevent accidental breeding and hopefully reduce the number of dogs needing rescue. Now, there are still heaps of dogs needing rescue, so has that been successful? I don't know. Before I get into more of those issues, though, what prompted this is today the graduation final manners class was at a cafe. And, you know, by then we've already been working on them for a while. I mean, I was working with Triton on a lot of this stuff before this whole class started. There was a bit of delay getting this class going because I was the only person signed up for a while. But yeah, we went to a cafe, got them to settle, and then we were going through all their milestones, like, you know, there's how they were, what their score was at the start of this sort of 6-week program, and then how they are today. We had to score them. We're going through all that. And at some point, I don't remember how this topic came up, but the topic of Triton being a guardian dog came up. And the other girl who has a rescue dog, there's only 2 of us in the class, and she's got a rescue dog. And she hadn't heard of guardian dogs, and so I was explaining that whole thing. And this trainer, this is the other element is also the positive only trainers. She is a positive only trainer. And for the most part, she's pretty good at keeping her opinions mostly to herself, but every now and then will say something where I'm like, you know, even with the puppy class, I sort of picked that up a little bit. Because, for example, when Triton was chewing things he shouldn't, I got this spray stuff to make those things not taste so good. And he would stop chewing it for a bit, because when he was a baby, he wanted to chew everything. I haven't had to use it in a long while, but when I mentioned in the early puppy class, she was sort of like, you're gonna make him, like, basically implying that he won't like me if I use a technique like that, which is absolutely not true. He loves me. Even if I do something like, you know, I get mad at him or whatever, he's like, oh, I'm sorry, but he still loves me. So doing like small things, small negative things isn't going to change the opinion of the dog. Maybe certain breeds, but not Triton's breed is very chill, very forgiving. That's why one of the reasons I got him. So yeah, I picked up on that judgment a while back. Today though, talking about the guardian dog, explaining to this other owner how the whole system works and, like, you know, the contract that I signed to prevent you know, irresponsible breeding, and I was explaining, like, you know, all that, and then the positive only trainer sort of perked up about, like, you know, those contracts, they can't be enforced, blah blah, and I'm like, I didn't really want to argue too much because I'm not a lawyer, but I signed a legal contract. I'm pretty sure it's a legal contract, like, you know, it's all in writing, so there would be some ability, they just probably have to take me to court if anything went wrong, I don't know. And it just got me thinking, because, you know, I could tell, I got the vibe, the very strong vibe, that she wanted to talk, like, you know, if this wasn't a situation where her client's paying her money, she would have wanted to have a bit more of the argument about, you know, not having your dog desexed, because obviously if Triton's going to breed, I can't desex him, and our breeder doesn't want any of their dogs desexed until they're like at least 14 months old to make sure they go through the full development, which is a situation I've never been in. So regardless of whether he was going to be a guardian dog, I would not be able to desex him for a long time. Yeah, so I just picked up on that disapproval coming off her, and it just made me think about, like, you know, I've been wanting to talk about whether you rescue or whether you go for a breeder, and just the conflict between the two groups. On this channel, those of you who know me, I'm very much about nuance, and I don't think there's like one size fits all for a lot of issues. Where will we start with this discussion? Well, I was going to keep rescuing dogs, right? So let me talk about why I decided to choose a breeder dog, a purebred dog, rather than going for another rescue. So my last dog, Hope, he was my soul dog. I was very attached to him. It still hurts that he's gone. One of these necklaces, this one has his ashes. I wear it every day still. So yeah, he's like, even with Triton here now, which I shouldn't talk too loud because he's napping, I still have the stronger attachment to Hope. Like, he meant that much to me. I think that's partly because he was a small dog. You can pick him up. There's more of a maternal instinct in something that you can pick up like that. But also there's a lot of trauma involved because he was very anxious and he had a lot of medical problems. And so I had to like really look after him. And, I was constantly worried. He would have periods of time where he was healthy and fine, but always in the back of my mind, when is the next issue going to come up? And, small dog, a little bit fragile, especially as he was getting older. So, he would have back problems, like his back would get sore sometimes. And, just out of the blue, maybe he chased a bird too much. He had teeth problems, the small little mouths. It took me a while to realize I had to brush his teeth, and then I had to teach him to brush his teeth because the chews weren't doing enough. And then he had some pretty major health problems. The biggest one was in 2020. I made a video about that, where he had an autoimmune disorder, and I thought we were going to lose him then. It was a really stressful time, and he needed a long period of medication and checkups after that. Then he was the healthiest he ever was in his life, and then he got cluster seizures, which is in his brain, and that's much harder to treat, and I had to make the really hard decision to let him go. In the lead up to the cluster seizures, I had been having thoughts about, like, he could live for a long time, but that feeling that something was, what's going to be the next thing had flared up a bit. So I don't know if, like, I subconsciously picked up that something was going wrong in his brain, because, sometimes when you have an illness, there are different scents, and dogs can pick up on it. That's why some dogs can sniff out cancer or epilepsy or whatever. But as humans, we're less in tune with our sense of smell, so maybe I could pick it up, but I just didn't know what my brain was picking up on. Very subtle kind of thing. Anyway, basically, as much as, like, I was really attached to him, but I also had a lot of anxiety and stress about him, and then, of course, when he went through each of the different medical conditions, that's a huge amount of stress. And when we had to let him go, I realized, like, I could not do that again. I could not risk having that sort of a dog again. Like, he got so anxious towards the end that I stopped taking him to dog parks, stopped driving him, couldn't take him very many places. We pretty much only walked the same 15-minute route every day because he didn't want to go anywhere else. If I changed the route, he would get upset. And so it kind of restricted what I was able to do. And I got to a point where I realized if I went away, he probably wouldn't cope so well without me, especially once Marley, the rescue Labrador, passed away. He became much more attached to me because, his friend's gone. It was weird because I didn't realize they had such feelings for each other, but it was sort of this love-hate thing. He would boss the Labrador around a lot, but actually did care about him. And the day that we didn't bring him home from the vet, I think Hope picked up that something had happened. The dogs, they pick up on more than you know. Anyway, he got more attached to me, and I just felt like I couldn't really do anything. I had to plan my life around him, and, I became very worried about leaving to go anywhere. And it's just like this level of stress and worrying about him. I'm like, I can't do another high needs dog. Now, the problem with rescue dogs, so on the health issue, the problem with rescue dogs is some of them do have medical conditions, and you don't always know their history because sometimes they, they end up in a shelter in circumstances where no one has passed on any of that kind of information. So there's a bit of a lottery there. You don't know anything about their background. And this will also bring in some of the mixed breed because he was a Maltese Chihuahua. The first time I ever had a mixed breed dog, because before that we had Labrador And then the accidental breeder rescue was a Chinese crested powder puff. And then we had another Labrador, purebred, just traumatized. But Hope was a Maltese Chihuahua. First time I ever had a mixed breed. I assumed that being a mixed breed, he would have better mix of genetics and be a healthier dog overall. Instead, what I've come to realize is that mixed breeds, instead of compensating for the issues with the different breeds involved, sometimes you just inherit all the bad, all the negatives. So like with some of the the oodle dogs, I forget which one is the worst, like maybe cavoodles or something, the two different breeds, I can't remember if it's one or both, but there's like a heart condition in there, and so a lot of these cavoodles apparently will just like drop dead. And I think it happened to one of my cousins, like suddenly had a heart issue, their dog had a heart issue, and that's it. And it seems like instead of the mixed breed compensating for the genetic defects within each dog, it just compounds them and they can actually be less healthy despite the genetic diversity. So there's a bit of a gamble there, and it makes me think of the joke where you've got Einstein and Marilyn Monroe, who's supposed to be like super pretty, so super pretty and super smart, and Marilyn Monroe goes up to Einstein and says, we should have kids because I'm so good looking, you're so smart, we could have the most good looking intelligent kid ever. And then Einstein says, yeah, okay, so the kid could have my brains and your looks. Alternatively, he could have my looks and your brain. So instead of being a good-looking, smart baby, they could have an ugly, dumb baby. There's sort of that element. And so most rescue dogs, or a significant number of rescue dogs, are these random mixes. So there's like that health aspect that makes me go, don't know their history, don't know anything about them, don't know how the mixed breed thing is going to go. And so that made me wary of rescues. Whereas with a breeder, if you go for a responsible breeder, so I had to do a lot of research first, if you go for a responsible breeder, they know the history of their dogs. A responsible breeder will do all the genetic tests. They keep up to date with how their dogs are doing once they leave them. And try and keep tabs on whether any health issues come out in their lines down the track. There's a lot of that there, and they know what their dogs are going to be like. Now, it's never a guarantee, but they have a better chance of being able to tell you what that's like. And then certain breeds are healthier than others. The reason I chose a Spitz type breed, a breed that looks very wolf-like, a very naturalistic breed that hasn't been overbred over thousands of years, like the Finnish Lapland, which is what Triton is. They were only standardized mid last century, and then it took a while to really get breeding programs going, and quite a lot of dogs, because they were from this tribe who weren't specifically breeding a particular breed, they were breeding for health and function. There's a lot of dogs that never got officially recognized as the breed, but if you bring them forward, they will recognize them. So like there's still genetic diversity within all that, and they are quite healthy because they haven't been bred to have the stupid short faces, like those short-faced breeds that need surgery to be able to breathe properly. It's not like that. They have a more natural wolf-like shape, so there's less weird stuff going on, and the main health issues they have are the sort of health issues that all dogs have, potentially. So I looked at that as one of the considerations. Health was so important to me because I just went through so much with Hope's issues. Like, I don't know how much I spent on his vet bills over the years, but it's the most out of any dog I had. Even weird things like, if he was humping his favorite toy and his little rocket popped out, he wouldn't be able to get it back in. Eventually I realized if I trimmed his privates, then it was fine. But until then, there would be late night visits to the night vet, which is more expensive than the regular vet. And he had $100 sugar bath one time to get it back in, because it can be quite a serious issue if you don't address it quickly. So, and none of my other male dogs had that issue. And Triton has popped his rocket out a few times. It goes back in fine. Which, the first time it happened, I panicked a little bit, but he's fine. I guess because his fur is just natural, whereas Hope, being Maltese Chihuahua, there's a lot going on in there. Um, his body just didn't know what to do with that fur, I guess. Anyway, so health. A lot of rambling about health. Okay, another problem, specifically like with behavior. Okay, behavior, which is particularly important for my situation because I have a disabled brother. He can walk, but he's like unsteady, so he can't have like a big buffy dog who will knock him over. Um, a Labrador's probably pushing it a little bit because they can, when they get energetic, they can be a bit much like that. Um, yeah, so that's a consideration. There's certain breeds are just not suited to being around my disabled brother. Also, my parents are getting older, and a dog can be like a 10 to 15 year commitment. So by the end of the dog's life, they're going to be very frail, and the chances of me moving out are very slim. Um, so yeah, and then I've got my own mental health issues, so there's a few peculiarities around that. Like if I feel like with Hope, I felt like I couldn't really do much because I was constantly worried about his health issues, that sort of adds to all that. But anyway, that's going back to health. No, behavior. So with rescues, it can be a bit of a lottery. I mean, by the time they're ready to be adopted, you hope that the shelter has figured out what their personality is like and who they can be around. And a lot of them these days do seem to screen for that better. But like in the case of Hope, he was fine. He was just super anxious. So he's fine in the house. It's just like I couldn't do a whole lot with him, especially towards the end. And the anxiety sort of rubbed off on me because I was worried about him being anxious. Um, yeah, so there's a little bit of that going on. Now, with a breeder dog, especially getting one as a puppy, you don't really know how they're going to develop. But if you get a good breeder who knows their dogs, my breeder, they actually did like the full temperament assessment, and they recommended a dog to me, or assigned a dog to me based on what we needed. And it's worked out pretty well. Like Triton is pretty good in that sense. And the other thing is like getting a dog as a puppy, you can shape their behavior to a certain degree. And I have noticed with all our puppies, they've always coped better with Mikey, with my disabled brother, compared to the dogs that we got as adults. So our first Labrador and Hope, really good with Mikey. Our Chinese Crested and our rescue Labrador, they were okay with him. They were just very wary, and they tended to avoid him rather than interact with him. Because he is a lot. But when they've grown up around him, they do fine. And Triton has already figured that out. He's more gentle with him, and they have worked out their own games together. And it's really like, I didn't teach that. He just does it. So, I had to get a puppy. And that puts constraints. Like, yeah, I could get a rescue puppy, but it's a lot harder to find a rescue puppy because someone has to have either abandoned them at an early age, which a lot of people don't do. They like the puppy stage, and then it becomes an adult, or it gets up to like their teenage years, and they, the sort of adolescence period, and then they can't cope with a dog. People tend to like the dogs in the very, very baby puppy stage, which is when a lot of the socialization is going on, and that's your best chance to shape the dog to fit whatever situation they're going to be in. So they don't really abandon them after that. Or like in Hope's case, their mum gets put in the shelter while pregnant, and then they're born in the shelter, but then they don't get a lot of the developmental assistance. So like with Triton's breeder, they have this whole super puppy program where they expose them to different stimuli, and so as a result, Triton is not scared of thunderstorms and fireworks. And like we've got a lot of construction going on in my neighborhood. He's actually really curious about construction. Just today, he went and sat in front of a guy who was like putting together his, I don't know if it was a grinder or some kind of rotating saw, but just Triton went up and just sat in front of him and was like, "Oh, what you doing?" And then the other day I was walking past, and they had one of these big crane things with a jackhammer attached, and he could see it lifting up. And he barked at it initially, but then he wanted to go over and have a look, and he looked in the construction site, and, all the dudes patting him. So very curious, open to experiences, and generally not afraid of things. He might be concerned for a moment, but then he warms up to the experience. Whereas Hope, I know he didn't get that because he was terrified of storms, and terrified of everything. Yes, he was a little dog, but like not all little dogs are like that if you socialize them properly early, and that's not what happened. I didn't get him until 12 weeks as well, so there was that. He missed out on a lot of that early development, and plus he had a hernia, which they said they fixed during desexing, but it wasn't. We had to desex it a few years, so we had to get that hernia fixed a few years later again, and in the meantime there was a lot of pain for him, and that made him even more anxious, I think. Yeah, so that's a consideration. Temperament. So health, temperament. I needed to get a puppy because of my situation. Needs to grow up around all the chaos that we live in. Hard to find puppies at a rescue shelter, and even when you do, they've already been through a lot of shit, and it can affect how they view the world, and the issues that they end up having psychologically, things like that intense anxiety that makes it really hard for them to do anything. And I looked after Hope as best as I could with the knowledge that I had, but it ended up causing me so much more stress, and I have such mental health issues, it just wasn't good for me. Now also there's the choice of I feel like this has not addressed the point of what I was going for, and this is where I tend to end the video and then re-record. But no, I will keep going. I will persist, even though this isn't. Don't chicken out of the video now. Okay, sorry. I was just contemplating deleting the video and starting again. But no, that's fine. We'll keep going. In terms of a choice of dog, so this time I decided I can't do a large dog again. I need a dog that is less than half my weight, and I'm usually around 50 kilos, so less than 25 kilo dog. So really not a Labrador. I think Marley was 28 kilos. Our female Labrador was 38 because Mum was in denial about making her fat, but I'm surprised she lived so long. Yeah, no, Labrador, just he was so strong, Marley, and so when he was older, he chilled out, but he used to pull on the lead because he wasn't trained properly, and I didn't know as much about training back then. So, but yeah, just to control a larger dog, it's harder. And as I said, brother, disabled, unsteady on his feet, parents getting older. I didn't want a large dog, but after everything with Hope, I didn't want a small dog because they're so fragile. And I also didn't want a dog to compare him to. So I wanted a medium-sized dog. I knew that much. But when I looked at medium-sized puppies in the shelters, I went through all of them. And a lot of them were Staffy mixes. And Staffies, they can be cute, but they're really buffy dogs, and they're just not suitable for my disabled brother. And then same with all the Kelpie crosses and Husky crosses and all of these kinds of breeds. It was really hard to find. There were no dogs within my criteria at the rescue shelters. What kinds of dogs are ending up in shelters? It's some of these more difficult to control dogs, the Kelpie crosses. They've got a lot of energy because they're meant to be working dogs and, out on farms and whatever. And then you've got the Staffies who are quite buffy, and if people don't know what they're doing, they can be quite hard to manage. And then Huskies as well, hard to manage. They're the ones with the attitude. And, you don't see dogs. So this is where we get up to a bit of responsible breeding. I needed a medium-sized dog as a puppy and the right sort of breed to fit in with my family situation. Couldn't find that in a rescue shelter. Had to go to a breeder. Finnish Lapland, medium size, very healthy, and this breeder is amazing. The amount of detail, the amount of paperwork I had to fill out, and then all the preparation work I had to do, and submit a thing saying I have done all this preparation, full on. They have calls, 10, you get 10 one-on-one calls with them through the puppy stage, and they also run webinars every month. And we've got a Facebook chat with the litter, and then there's a Facebook group to stay in touch with just the group of people who have got dogs from that breeder. And then you also have to join the New South Wales Finnish Lapland Club, so then there's that as well. They just have a ridiculous amount of support. And if at any point you can't look after your dog that they bred, they will accept that dog back rather than allow it to go into the shelter. They will take care of rehoming the dog if there are any issues. That's what a responsible breeder does. And, they're very strict on making sure people know about responsible breeding. So even with the guardian programs, like in our contracts, it says if your dog accidentally has a litter, you owe them money. And this is like where the positive only trainer was saying you can't enforce that, blah, blah. I'm not a lawyer, so we'll just let that go for the moment. Yeah, anyway, breeder. Amazing. Where was I going with that? Oh, the responsible breeding thing. Yeah, so if anyone gets one of these, and the Finnish Lapland from this breeder, quite expensive. So you are paying, if you're paying a lot of money, chances are you're not going to just abandon this dog, right? And if you have gone through their whole program, the chances of you being an irresponsible breeder, letting your undesexed dog have a litter, fairly low. A little bit more risk there, but fairly low. The breeder keeps in contact with you for quite a while. And then, if at any point you can't look after the dog, they will take it back. Also, if your dog does accidentally have a litter, it's in the contract to say that they will take care of the litter rather than allow the babies to just go off into shelters and whatever. So this breeder is not adding to the burden on rescue shelters. And this is something I didn't really know about. I always thought, I don't think I ever judged anyone for having a purebred dog or going to a breeder, but I did feel like, the best thing to do is to rescue. I know there are some people who only rescue who think that anyone who goes to a breeder is horrible and they're contributing to puppy farms and whatever. But the more I look at it, the more I think they just don't know what they're talking about. If you look at the kinds of dogs that are in rescue shelters, and this is probably where I should have started the video on because it's maybe the biggest issue. The kinds of dogs that end up in rescue shelters are not these very specifically bred dogs. The responsible breeders are looking after their dogs and their dogs' offspring. The kinds of dogs that end up in a shelter, it's mostly like these staffies. I wish people would stop breeding the staffies because there's clearly enough of them. There's so many in the shelters. There's stuff like that. Some dogs will end up in shelters because, the owners have suddenly lost their home or become ill or something. But then there's people who just abandon them. There's a lot of oodles, and there's a difference between a responsible breeder and a puppy farm. I've just told you what my breeder for Triton is like. That is responsible breeding. I did so much research before I went with them, before I decided, yeah, they're fine. And, I looked at a whole bunch of other dogs and, this breeder was the only one that had a really full-on website so that you could get all the information you could possibly want about them. They've got Facebook and Instagram and you can see what everything is like. They actually show so much. And they were in a program. There's a website that helps you find responsible breeders. And I think it's Right Paw or something. And they also do an audit of the breeders on their that they accept onto their website. So there was so much there that gave me the confidence to go with them. But you contrast that, recently in Tasmania, there was the Labradoodle puppy farm that got shut down and they suddenly had to rehome 250 dogs from this puppy farm. And then it comes out that people who got Labradoodles from them, they have a lot of these health problems. And, you hear about all the overbreeding, the conditions that the dogs are being kept in. They are not being given the super puppy socialization programs that Triton's breeder did for him. And, I got videos throughout Triton's, the first 8 weeks of his life. I was getting updates on what are they doing this week? And we would get videos. I posted some of those videos on Patreon. And, I also got to meet him at 5 weeks. I met them. I was able to ask all the questions that I wanted. But with these Labradoodles in Tasmania, when they, I've read the articles, so I don't know firsthand what it was like. But in the articles, they're saying, these dogs being kept in not good conditions. And some of them hadn't even really seen many humans in their life. So they've got a lot to catch up on as they're rehomed. And 250 dogs in one oh my god, that's a lot of dogs, and you know how many litters they've got coming through, and clearly they're making a lot of money, and that's why they did it. Whereas my breeder, you know, they have a guardian dog a program for a reason. Guardian dog, it means instead of keeping all their breeding stock on site, their dogs actually go off with families and have normal lives, except for the moments where they're breeding. And then they go back and have normal lives. They do have some of their own breeding stock on site, but for the most part, they have the guardian dog program so that most of the dogs will have normal lives. And it's just like, you know, they keep their show dogs and, you know, some of their very sentimental dogs, and then some of the staff have will have some of those dogs as well. Whereas it sounds like this Tasmanian Labradoodle puppy farm, they just had a heap of breeding dogs on site, overbred them, made them have back-to-back litters and all that. That's a puppy farm. That's one that needs to be shut down. And it has been shut down, and then it's caused more problems for the RSPCA. But except that people were really good at coming on board, and I think so many people offered to adopt these dogs that they had to close expressions of interest. Now, oodle dogs are very fashionable, at least in Australia. Don't know why, I'm so tired of seeing oodles everywhere, but whatever. So, you know, that probably helped with the shutdown, because there would have been a lot of people who wanted those dogs, and yeah, whatever. But so there's a real difference there, that, like, you know, you do see oodles in rescue shelters. If you go to a rescue shelter, the chances of finding a Finnish Lapphund or any other sort of weird niche breed, you're probably not going to find them, because most of the people breeding those dogs are obsessed with their dogs and do not want their dogs ending up in shit situations. Now, caveat, because, like, you know, this is Nuance. Some rescue dogs are amazing, and some breeders are shit. But, you know, if we're thinking about Nuance, like, you know, there's the middle ground. One is not necessarily better than the other. Responsible breeders are not adding to the problem of rescue shelters. Now, there is the argument, like, oh, if there weren't breeders breeding more dogs, then more people who want dogs would rescue instead. I used to do that, though, and I would have kept rescuing, except that there are problems with health, temperament, puppy stage, trying to find the right breed. I stopped rescuing because it didn't suit my situation. I still wanted a dog, though, and I kind of needed a dog because after Hope, I wasn't sure I was going to stay alive. I have severe mental health problems. And Triton, like, getting a dog, I could have just not got a dog. It could have been a choice between no dog or rescue. But if there was no dog, I might not be alive right now, and I certainly wouldn't be getting out and about. Like, he's making me get out into the local area. People are getting to know us. He's getting kind of famous. He's taking me to all these shops that I've never been in before. I started driving again, so I'm also going more places just driving him, but, like, also the skill of driving. I'm doing that again. So he's getting me out of the house. After Hope passed away, like, when Hope was alive, I was still walking him every day. I didn't go out very much, but I was walking him every day for 15 minutes. And then occasionally I go out, but not very often. Whereas with Triton, I'm getting out every day, definitely spending less time on my own. Oh my god, I think Mikey might be home soon, because this video is taking me longer to get to the damn point. But basically, point being, there are reasons that you might want to get a breeder dog. You know, for me, it just worked out better for my situation, and, you know, being able to follow him through his puppy stage, I think helped. It helped get me invested, whereas I thought after Hope I might not be able to form an attachment with another animal ever again. I'm still not as attached to Triton as I was to Hope, but being able to see his development, it got me invested in his story and invested in his development, and for me psychologically, that worked out better. And I do feel that his breeder is responsible. Now, I didn't choose to be in the Guardian program originally. I told him I didn't want a Guardian dog, but it turned out that his temperament is perfect for the Guardian dog program and for my situation. So, you know, they ended up explaining to me how things work, and I was like, okay, that sounds good. I did connect with him more than his brother, so yeah, let's do it. So it took me a little while to come around to that, but I just wanted to share some of my experience, I guess, and say, like, you know, people who do dog breeding, they're not all the devil. Like, nuance, please. You know, and some of the shelter dogs, like, you want to rescue them all, but it's not possible. Some of them will not be able to be rehomed, and I know those are the ones that tend to get put down, and it's sad, it's not their fault, but that's just kind of, you know, the way of things, I guess. And yeah, Mikey's home, so I'm gonna have to go unless I edit this. I'm sure I had more to say, but I just want people who, you know, I've noticed a bit the people who do positive only training, I get the sense that they're a little bit like they have less concept of nuance. I don't know for sure because I haven't really met a lot of non positive trainers, but just from what I've seen on the internet, the positive only trainers tend to be very stuck in one idea, whereas the more balanced trainers are a bit more open to different things. Now, I do think positive training is the best for a puppy because you don't want to traumatize them, but it's not the solution to everything. And I think along with that, that might also be why the positive trainer was more into rescuing and had that disapproving vibe about breeder dogs. And you know, the whole thing about him being a guardian dog. And I noticed she didn't try and sell me any of her subsequent courses. And I did find, you know, going through Triton's breeder group, the Facebook group, when I was looking up grooming, I actually saw, just by chance, her company mentioned, and she's the only person in the company really, so it's basically her, it mentioned that she was very disapproving of undesexed dogs, and didn't actually allow them in her classes past a certain age. So I think that's probably why she didn't offer any extra classes to Triton, even though she would make money off it. I wasn't going to ask though, because I've sort of like gotten the idea that she's probably not the right approach moving forward. I just went with her because with Triton's car sickness, he couldn't actually, like, I wanted to take him to obedience, but the closest obedience to me is such a long trip. I need to work more on his car sickness before he can do it. Yeah, how do I manage that? That's an ongoing project, and I might be being too cautious. But anyway, I just found that kind of an interesting thing. Like, the judgment, there's no nuance. It's sort of this black and white thinking. It's like you either rescue or you're a bad person, or I don't know, just like disapproving of my choices with getting a purebred dog and being involved in the breeding program somehow. Yeah, just sort of sharing my experience, because like I was one of the more like, I want to always rescue, but there's a point in my life where I realized it's just not appropriate to my situation, and the breeders are not contributing to that problem of rescues and dogs being abandoned. Like, it's a specific group of people who are doing the backyard breeding, and I guess when they do the backyard breeding, they're not paying attention to their dogs, so then those offspring go on to backyard breed, you know, and the puppy farms and so on. They don't care. So they don't care if their dogs don't get desexed and then do go on to have their own litters. And, you know, if they're not screening the owners as well, there's stuff going on there. Like, I met a guy while I was looking at stuff for Triton. Like, you know, I went out to where all the obedience classes were without him, and I did meet a guy who had his dog had had a litter with his friend's dog, and you can just tell the kind of person who is irresponsible like that. You can kind of, there's a vibe. And so, you know, if a breeder met that kind of person, I don't think they would hand their puppies over to someone like that. But, you know, it varies, because not all breeders are sensible. Anyway, I'm going in circles, I think. It's just one of those things where I'm like, where is the nuance? And I see on social media some of these people who are just absolutely against anything except rescue. You know, adopt, don't shop. And yeah, it's trying to push a one size fits all on everyone. And, you know, for someone like me, Triton was the best thing. Anyway, I've got to go. It's a shame that I didn't have time to really organize my thoughts, but that's my channel for you, hey.